Thank you so much. As you see that this session is being recorded, feel free to have your cameras off. It's really up to you. We do not require that you be on camera. We do ask that you would go ahead and sign into the chat with your name and your organization, please. And also, please be sure to remain on mute. So let's start. This is the Funding a Network of Community Conveners for Neighborhood Safety Request for Proposals Bidders call. We call it a bidders conference. We also call it a pre-solicitation conference. All that means is that we are providing an opportunity for a read-through with potential applicants. This is not a mandatory discussion. You certainly are able to, organizations are able to apply without participating in this bidders. We offer it as a convenience and an opportunity for potential applicants to ask some questions. We'll talk a little bit more about other ways that people can ask questions and the time that you have available to do so. Again, we ask if you are on the call, please be sure to mute as we go forward. Let's start with introductions. My name is Marlita White, and I manage the Office of Violence Prevention here at CDPH. We're going to allow our team members to also introduce themselves. So let's start with, if we have representatives from the mayor's office, to please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Lydia Sorensen here, First Deputy for the Mayor's Office of Community Safety.
Good afternoon, Natasha Scott, Assistant Deputy Mayor of Community Safety.
Great, let's move then to the Chicago Department of Public Health. I've mentioned who I am in my role here at CDPH. Do we have other members from CDPH on the call?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erica B. Davis. I am the Program Director in the Office of Violence Prevention with the Chicago Department of Public Health.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Ortiz. I'm with the Office of Violence Prevention, and I am a Public Health Administrator 3. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Kettler, and I'm the Operations Lead for the Community Safety Coordination Center at CDPH.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Hardy. I am the Program Monitor for Victim Service with the Office of Violence Prevention with CDPH.
Good afternoon, Corey Berman, they, them. I am a Public Health Administrator 3 with the Office of Violence Prevention, CDPH.
Good afternoon, Elvis Ortega with the Community Safety Coordination Center and CDPH.
Great, do we have any other staff on the city side? Okay, so thank you all for joining. As you see, we ask a few things of you. We're letting you know that this session is being recorded. We do ask that everyone would please stay on mute as the session goes forward. You do have an opportunity to submit questions via the chat, and so feel free to do that. And as we move through toward the end of the call, we will then go to the chat and move through those questions. We also ask in your chat, and as you submit your questions, please recall the number of the slide. It may help us to be more specific in our response.
I'll call you back when this is over. They're about to start.
Again, at the end of the question period, you will have an opportunity to review this recording as well as frequently asked questions. And those all will be attached to the RFP. And so don't feel like you have to, necessarily take copious notes. Feel free to do so. But we will also make this recording and the answers to all the questions available as we move forward. Beyond our introductions, we will spend time in this call to walk through the overview of this RFP, this request for proposals, the timelines. We will provide some details and then also address some questions, your questions, and provide some answers, and then just some closing remarks. We do want to remind you that this is a summary of the RFP. If there are any discrepancies, always follow the posted RFP for a full listing of all the requirements and expectations. And so I'm glad Lydia and Natasha are on the call. We wanted to provide an opportunity for our leadership at the mayor's office to speak a little bit about the work that the mayor's office is doing, as this RFP is a direct outcome from that work. Lydia or Natasha, can I impose on you all to say a little bit about this? We offered the executive summary, but thought you might want to lift up other items.
Sure. Thanks, Marlita. Good afternoon, everyone. We're excited to have you on today to learn a little bit about this RFP. I will just touch very quickly on some of the work that we're doing within the Mayor's Office of Community Safety. Our overarching vision is to invest intentionally in people and communities through a whole of government and community-driven approach. One of the ways that we're doing that is through our People's Plan for Community Safety, which you may have heard of. It was launched back in December and we've been starting implementation over the course of the last few months. And that plan really takes a two-pronged approach, aiming to address the root causes of harm and violence. A place-based approach, recognizing that we need to intentionally reinvest in communities that have experienced historic disinvestment through all of the ways that we address community safety and harm. So thinking about things like education, community environment, health, housing, and others, and kind of in that vein. And the other way is a people-based approach, recognizing that we need to support those who have been most impacted by harm and violence, regardless of where they live. This includes our adults of highest promise and youth of highest promise populations, which is, we know language is important. So this is an asset-based approach to thinking about what has traditionally been called youth of highest risk or adults of highest risk, and our victims and survivors population. We announced the 4 communities where we'll be focusing the People's Plan for Community Safety in our first phase of rollout. And those are 10 census group block groups within West Garfield Park, Austin, Little Village, South Lawndale, and Englewood. And we're excited to get a chance to release this RFP as an opportunity for us to work with community-based organizations deeply embedded in those communities and it really advance our kind of hyper-local place-based work.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I'm trying to also assist people as we're moving through the conversation to be on mute. So if you notice that we provide that assistance, you're welcome. So let's keep going. Beyond the executive summary, we want to talk a little bit more about the RFP in detail. So the purpose of this RFP, you've heard us talk about the People's Plan for Community Safety. This is a community-led initiative that makes all of Chicago safe by providing funding and opportunities to the communities that are most impacted by economic disinvestment, violence, systemic racism, and the severe and multi-layered harm caused by the war on drugs. The aim is to harness the full force of government organizations in the community, businesses, philanthropy, faith leaders, and others to interrupt and address acute violence, while also investing to prevent crime in the future by addressing the root drivers of community safety. And so we just heard a reference to the communities where some of this work is being grounded from a place-based perspective. We'll talk more about that as we move forward. And looking more specifically at this RFP, it is designed to identify, as you've heard, 4 community-based organizations to serve as the Mayor's Office of Community Safety, People's Plan for Community Safety convener in one of those 4 designated community areas. And again, that's Austin, Inglewood, South Lawndale, Little Village, and West Garfield Park. The funds for this opportunity, it's $1 million. That means $250,000 per award is available for the initial contract period. And want people to also take note that the initial period begins in June and will go through August 31st, 2025. So that's a little bit over 12 months. So that's going to be important for you as you think about your budget and all of your program activities. There will be, as is usual with our grant opportunities, a possibility for extensions. For this award, you will be able to extend for up to 2 different terms. Each of those terms are 1 year in length. The subsequent award levels for those extensions remains $250,000. And for each of those extensions, it would be for a 12-month period. So you would keep in mind that you would reset your budget with a 12-month period in mind. There's also a minimum of 10% for the awarded funding that is designated for retaining and incentivizing participation. Again, if we have any discrepancies between our deck and the RFP, as stated, is the lead. Let's talk a little bit about the actual activities that are called for in the RFP. We're asking that as you imagine your organization applying, you would think through, one moment.
What's going on?
Asking that all applicants would be prepared to work with other community-based organizations, again, local faith and business leaders and residents to provide services and programming that are in line with the People's Plan for Community Safety priorities and existing and new quality of life plans. That the organization that would be the applicant would work with the city and other community stakeholders to implement programming, events, and projects within the community area for which they are the convener, and for whichever particular block groups of highest priority for the city that may be within that community area. Again, much of this work is, if not all, is in deep partnership with the communities that the organizations that are in those communities and the city's mayor's office on community safety. So there won't be a need for the applicant to kind of wonder where to go. There will be lots of partnership and support. Also, other activities would be to coordinate and facilitate regular meetings between community leaders and the city, including managing follow-up and other requests for support that might arise from these conversations. Collecting community concerns and feedback related to community safety and crime, including community concerns related to the distribution of illegal drugs, escalating those concerns to the appropriate city staff, department, and agency, and supporting a response. And then lastly, to assess and compile information on community assets and needs to serve as a liaison between the community members and the city. Let's talk about some of the important dates. The RFP was released on Friday, May 3rd. Today is our bidders conference where we are discussing this RFP opportunity. You do have until May the 14th to submit questions. And that means by 5 o'clock, you can submit questions that you would like the RFP host to provide additional details back to you. We typically request that those questions be in the form of email so that we can be sure to understand the questions very specifically. And then we take those same questions and our responses and use that to um, we use those questions and answers to populate a frequently asked questions document so that everyone can benefit from the questions that you all may raise, even if it doesn't come up in this call. All responses, meaning all applications, are due by June 3rd, 2024 at noon. I'm not sure how many of you have used iSupplier as an application environment. If you have not used iSupplier, I think it is important that you know that iSupplier is an automated system. So that means if the application closes at noon, that means the system will not accept new applications at 12:01. So please do plan to submit in advance of that timeline. We would hate to miss a compelling application because of computer issues or other kinds of technical delays. As mentioned, the contract starts June 1st, 2024, and it ends August 31st, 2025. And we also mentioned that there would be 2 contract extensions likely, or I should say possible. Each of those extensions would not exceed 1 year. And it is at the discretion of the city in terms of funding and performance. But we would provide that feedback to any of the existing grantees as we move toward the next funding cycle. In terms of the background, the 4 communities you've heard both myself mention as well as Lydia, those were selected in the first round of the PPCS implementation based on the data that really focused on that communities or across various communities, the burden of safety and crime concerns, social determinants of health, those are health issues and status issues that might predispose a community to have additional risky outcomes, and histories of disinvestment. This plan is to reduce and prevent crime and violence by taking a hyperlocal approach. We heard that before. I think it's important that we're talking about stacking resources and investments. And so this is one of the, when we talked about the purposes of this award, it is to really support activities, but also facilitate funding opportunities and investments in these communities as a start. The role of the convener that the city seeks to fund is to partner again with other stakeholders in that community to identify assets and unmet needs, devise strategies for meeting those needs, and engage in an ongoing manner of kind of interaction and support with the city and other stakeholders. You're going to hear these words a lot because I think that this work is very much grounded in engagement at the community level, lifting up concerns at the community level, ensuring a discourse and remedies at the community level. Again, so we're talking about how do we identify potential partners who will work in those designated communities, that the community-based organization will develop community-based strategies and implementation plans for each of the specific objectives that are going to be identified across the mayor's plan. And these objectives are looking specifically at reducing and preventing crime, but not exclusively. So when we talk about those objectives, you see here, there are really kind of expansive examples: job training, engaging youth in education, investing in improvements to build and activate safe physical spaces, and beyond. Each CBO will create an advisory sector. And this is meaning that you would have these advisory tables that will be launched to provide additional input. Again, communication, exchange. So how do we make sure that certain segments of the community and certain sectors are deeply involved in the plans as they get realized? Labor leaders, faith leaders, philanthropic and business leaders. So really, again, thinking all of the elements that make up a community, we want to ensure that they are engaged and have access to contribute to the dialogue. These teams and tables are instrumental in shaping the strategies across those block groups in these initial 4 communities. And this work is envisioned to eventually be able to reach citywide, but certainly being well grounded in the communities where we are starting. And organizations as applicants would receive funding to be able to build capacity to serve as these community conveners. Again, we provide a list. You will see these lists in the RFP, so I won't go into any. Let me just see if there's anything that we haven't talked about already. Let's go down toward toward the bottom of this list because many of these items we've referenced already. Well, first we'll say coordinating and facilitating regular meetings. So we've talked already about, of course, having these leaders and multiple sectors involved, but we haven't talked about what that looks like. And so I think it's important that we are talking specifically about facilitating regular meetings so that we're not just saying a plan just appears, but we know that those plans need to be hosted in a way and that needs to be through the lens of continuous and regular engagement. Ensuring that we are assessing and compiling information on community assets and needs. And that means that those particular conveners would have access to city supports so that they can learn more about what's happening in community on the city side, but also having an opportunity or a mechanism to identify resources and assets on the community side that perhaps the city doesn't even know about. So definitely it would be this interaction between the city and the community, facilitating partnerships between neighborhood-based organizations and systems level partners. We're not assuming that we've got all the partnerships right and all the ones that we need. And so these conveners would certainly be a part of expanding those relationships and opportunities to engage. And then establishing additional relationships as needed to meet program goals. And then, as I said, we've talked a little bit and about some of these activities. Definitely dig into the RFP to see even more activities and engagements that we would anticipate being a part of this overall funding opportunity. In terms of eligibility, who can apply? The applicant should be a non-for-profit organization with a 501c3 status. We know that there are partners in community that do not necessarily have that status. And so we will talk a little bit about other ways that you can partner to ensure an application if this is something you're interested in submitting. Beyond having a not-for-profit agency as the lead, as the applicant should have an office located in the city of Chicago where you are providing services. You should be in good standing with the city of Chicago. And a lot of times people ask, what do we mean by that? So there are ways that perhaps an agency may be in debt to the city, and in those instances, that would be addressing those debt issues would be a part of an award circumstance. And so we just want organizations to be mindful that that would be a part of a funding conversation. But please don't not apply because you might be in debt. We want really to have a broad field of applicants, and the city would be, as I mentioned, we would engage you to really understand better your debt condition, to understand whether that, allows you to move forward or not. So take the most optimistic approach and apply. We also are saying in terms of eligibility, we're looking for partners that have the administrative, organizational, programmatic, information technology, and fiscal capability to plan, develop, implement, and evaluate the proposed project. And so we ask questions about, do you have how long have you been participating in this kind of work? Do you have the staff in place to be able to support your organization being able to conduct the planning, host the meetings, um, provide the communication necessary, submit your vouchers? So we're asking, what are your administrative and organizational skills and capability? Programmatic, is this a work that you understand and you have a positive track record in? And information technology, would information technology or would technology be a barrier for you? Again, we want a broad field of applicants. And so perhaps your organization does not right now. I don't think we ever want to assume that everyone's online even, or that everyone is comfortable in the internet space. If you feel that as your application, as you're considering an application, but feel like you may not have those capabilities, you're able to bring a partner into your application who will be able to support you in conducting these and ensuring these kinds of capabilities. Likewise for fiscal capability. So sometimes an organization might have an identity, but perhaps you're not a 501c3 organization. That would mean you would need a fiscal host or a fiscal sponsor to be able to submit. You're able to do that, and we encourage organizations to think creatively about how to partner so long as the applicant has the 501c3 status. If you are working in partnership, when we ask you about your other capabilities, just ensure that your application reflects the capabilities that you're going to call upon across your partnership.
Hello.
Across your partnership. We can take questions again as we're going through. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. But nevertheless, that's what we're looking for. We do make the note, and you see below, that sometimes organizations or applications will be started and the applicant will not complete the application, or they really don't address the critical minimums. And you'll see the note that we just reserve the right to not evaluate applications that are significantly incomplete. Let's talk about data collection and evaluation. Primarily, we're asking that all of the applicants would be prepared to collect data and ensure the reporting of the activities that you are conducting across your interventions. And for this award, the interventions really would be engaging the partners, ensuring those meetings are happening, developing these strategies and starting to implement across the strategies that are identified. And so we're making sure that you have the capability to not only conduct activities, but to report out on those activities. And the department will provide additional supports to ensure that any of the applicants understand the reporting templates that we use. Typically, we report through an Excel document. We may move to another environment, but it's always usually a spreadsheet environment, and that we're going to be working with the selected awardees to understand the reporting templates and ensure that all of the data that we're looking for, that you all, as the once awarded, you're well positioned to provide that information on a regular basis. Program and fiscal monitoring. The Department of Public Health, like all the city departments, if we have a grantee, this is a delegate grant arrangement. Any grantee is really subject to, and we hope welcomes, our ongoing support to ensure that the program is moving forward in the way that it is intended. That means if we have an instance where a grantee, for example, we say awardee and grantee, these are the same. If they're found to be non-compliant with program requirements, the city does have it holds its own discretion to require restoration of damages or costs. That normally is happening in an instance where we really have been very unsuccessful with being able to partner and ensure the delivery of the services that are part of the award process. But nevertheless, we want to share that is a possibility, but it is certainly not where we want to end up and not where we usually end up. Beyond the contract, once let's say an organization, you submit, you're selected, and then we move through a contracting process. All invoices, this is how organizations get paid. You submit an invoice, and it's important for us. Some organizations, again, if you haven't done business with the city, and certainly with CDPH, we operate on a reimbursement basis. I think that's very important, reimbursement basis. So that means the month after you do the service, you submit a voucher. And then the department, our team is reviewing those vouchers. We may interact with you because we may need additional documents or anything that is supplementary to the voucher. And all goods and services and deliverables are then on the same timeline. We're looking at vouchers, we're looking at all of your reporting in that same timeline. We process vouchers. Everything really happens. It's really kind of tied together with the goal that there's not a long delay for organizations to be able to receive their payments. We know that sometimes their initial months, the initial awards may take a couple of months, but given that we are moving swiftly, we really do anticipate and hope that there won't be significant delays. And when programs do have any significant delays on our side, then we do prioritize your invoices once you're able to invoice. Again, we can do much more, and we do much more training and orientation on how to invoice. But I still think it's important for an applicant to know that the city operates, or our programs operate, on a reimbursement basis. So that means you should have the capacity to start your program. You should have the cash flow to start your program, and knowing that the city then comes behind you to reimburse for any of your outlays from month to month. All the invoices are submitted through the iSupplier system. Hopefully, if you haven't already, you are familiar with iSupplier. Curious really quickly by a show of thumbs in the chat, and I'll ask our team to look, how many of your organizations are already using iSupplier to identify city grant opportunities? I see a lot. And are there organizations? That's great. It looks like a lot of you are using iSupplier. How about organizations that are not using iSupplier Anyone, is there a thumbs down option? Anyone not using iSupplier and is unfamiliar with iSupplier? I'm not seeing anything in the thread. There's maybe a couple. So I think it's important to know that the city uses iSupplier for our delegate agreements. The iSupplier is an online system, and we will make sure, actually, if you got this opportunity, then you also receive the link because it is attached to our announcement for this bidders call. So please do open a profile for your organization in iSupplier and make sure that you don't wait to the last minute. It may take 3, sometimes maybe up to 5 days for iSupplier to respond to your request for a profile. And again, we don't want that to serve as a delay for you accessing the actual application and being able to submit your application. So definitely go into iSupplier. You're going to also, as part of our monitoring, cooperate when we do our city audits. We do those at least at least annually. Sometimes we may do them more. It really depends on the kind of support that's needed, but we minimally will do an audit annually. We will have required meetings with CDPH, with the mayor's office. Again, we've already talked about required reporting, and then other kinds of ad hoc activities that come along. In terms of staffing, there is a requirement that there would be a full-time employee and that employee would have awareness of trauma-informed methods and awareness concepts, and that, again, making sure that you're looking at the RFP to be responsive not only to the required staffing, but also the expectations for that staff member's knowledge. And so we look to, as you are saying, you're going to hire in this particular way, that you would also ensure that your resumes are attached, as well as your job descriptions. Talking about budget and justification. The wages of your staff who are employed by this response, let's say your program is selected, they would serve as your employees, not City of Chicago employees. Every now and then someone has that question because they receive a grant from the city. Does that make my employees city workers? And that does not. They are your program employees. If you have staff that are working at an hourly rate, hourly wage, we ask that you would look at the City of Chicago's minimum wage and ensure that your staff um, um, uh, salary and or hourly rate does not fall below what the city would expect for these kinds of hires. We do ask that you identify those actual salaries and hourly rates in your actual grant application. You will complete a budget. But we also do look to see if the demands or the expectations for those staff appear to be in line with what the industry would expect for staff in terms of their skill level, their experience and lived experience and other experience in the field, and their titles and such. So we just like to flag for people that that is not something that the city ignores, and that we do often look at that. And sometimes people are caught off guard, like, oh, I didn't think that the city would care about that, and we do. I mentioned that you should have a job description, and we'll just say that your job description should include the details and responsibilities of said job. And we do look across. If you're saying you already have staff who are hired, and we're looking at their resumes, does the resume for those staff who are already hired match the job description that you're proposing? Lastly, in terms of the budget, it certainly is a detailed budget. And so we would ask that in the application, you would complete all of the justifications. So for example, you wouldn't just say, we're going to spend $1,500 for supplies. We do ask what kind of supplies. You say we're going to provide this kind of event. We might ask, well, how many of those events and how much are those events likely to cost? So you're making sure you're explaining the ways that you're going to expend your budget. Again, we talk about fiscal capability. Payment for services, again, are made on a reimbursement basis. You might see that we're being careful to say that often. If you're using multiple organizations as a part of your application, the application still is submitted by whomever is that lead. If you have other organizations that are part of the application, meaning they're fiscal hosts, or they are not a fiscal host, because then you're saying that that applicant, the host is the applicant. But if they're providing some fiscal capability or technological support, all those organizations then show up as your subcontractor. Your budget should be submitted for the first year of the award. And as we mentioned, this award will go from June 1st through August 31st, 2025. And so that means your budget should reflect all of your expenditures for that entire period. So when we say fiscal year, this fiscal year, the first one will exceed 12 months. So actually follow the period of time for the award. Don't limit that first budget to 12 months. And I think I've mentioned that piece already. Let's talk about selection and review. The way that the city identifies and awards applications is that we will review all complete applications, and that those applications are reviewed by an evaluation committee. That committee then would, one, receive training on the RFP, two, receive additional support and training to ensure that we are using common expectations to score all of our applications. And from there, those applications are read, scored. We propose then a list of recommended awardees to the Commissioner for Public Health, and the Commissioner makes the ultimate decision based on all of the feedback from the evaluators. The city reserves the right to accept or reject any and all parts of proposals, to take exception to parts of proposals, to request written or oral clarification of proposals or any support documents, or to cancel the RFP itself if it's in the city's best interest to do so. Respondents to the RFP, meaning applicants, may be asked to clarify your proposal. We might do so through a presentation. We might perform request a demonstration. We might request a site visit. So many ways, and many, we want to ensure that you know that we want to be flexible and that applicants ought to be flexible. If needed, if we require additional information to understand your application. The Chicago Department of Public Health reserves the right to negotiate separately with competing respondents for any or all parts of services for this RFP. The RFP is scored on a 100-point scale, and all of the point allocations are available in the RFP itself. The iSupplier access point, again, we really do encourage you all. It looks like many of you, most of you are already in the iSupplier system. If not, you should set up a new account. I mentioned 3 to 5 days. I think we're even going up to 7 days. So just do it early. And don't wait for your application. You don't even have to wait to start your application. You literally can start your iSupplier profile today. We do provide additional support for e-procurement, and that is the iSupplier system. So if you're struggling trying to figure out, oh, I put in this information, iSupplier is not responding to me, we have the customer support information here, and also the 312-744-HELP. Again, if you are not on mute, please do go ahead and mute yourself. We also want to encourage people to look at the online training materials. It's a link here, but it is if you go to the iSupplier homepage, what you see first is iSupplier, how to start an account, but also there's a tab that has all of the online help so that it shows you how to submit an application, how to attach documents. So there's lots of materials, training support for users on that iSupplier homepage. And just some quick tips. Late applications won't be accepted. I already mentioned that the system does close at the stated time. If you have questions, you can submit those through iSupplier through the e-procurement system. We also, you'll see on the RFP, there is an alternate way to submit a question to us. All those questions do need to come in by May 14th. In order for us to be able to respond to you, because after that period, we post all the answers. And in order for it to be fair, all applicants need to have access to all the same questions and all the same answers. We do ask applicants to be mindful that if you are submitting an application, please ensure that each question is answered in full. So don't assume that your evaluator, one, is an expert on the work that you do. We won't, and we encourage our evaluators to not go online and investigate your organization, to follow links in your application or anything like that. So pull all your information into the application itself. Also, make sure that if you felt that you answered partially a response in one question, and then what we don't want you to do is say, see the other question, I already answered that. Answer it again. That way you can ensure you receive all of the points and that you don't lose points, because we do not encourage our evaluators to go back and assume anything. So we are answering the questions that you answer where you answer them. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, allow time for your iSupplier credentials to come through. That is the end of the presentation. We can take some questions here. Also, please go ahead and add your questions in the chat because we will be responding and uplifting all of those chat questions for our frequently asked questions document that will become a part of this RFP posting. Do we have any? And I'll ask some of our CDPH staff. Are there questions in the chat that we can answer? Do we see any questions in the chat? Rick or
I don't see any
Corey?
questions in the chat, Marlita. I don't see any
Corey?
questions in the chat, Marlita.
No questions? Is there a match required? This RFP does not call for a match. That means sometimes you may see a funding opportunity and there needs to be matching funds. So organization is asking for $5,000, they have to put up 5,000 or something like that. There is no match required in this RFP opportunity. Do we have other questions?
What about should I be GATA certified?
I will have to double check on that. We do, in order for the city to initiate an award, Organizations do have to have like a DUNS number and some of those other government credentials. I'm not sure about GATA. And so we will double check that with our contracts partners.
Okay, are you able to speak to the specific capacity building supports this opportunity intends to provide to award recipients?
I don't think that, no, not really, because it's going to be varied dependent upon the needs of the selected organizations. And so what we're saying is that the department the department and the mayor's office will ensure that any of the selected organizations have access to orientation, capacity building, orientation, and training that will ensure they understand the work that the People's Plan is engaged in. They understand the types of relationships and strategies that are being asked about and required. But the specific details really will vary depending upon the particular needs of those organizations. Do we have any other questions?
Are organizations able to apply for more than one of the 4 communities? And how does that impact the application process?
Let me ask Rick. Rick, do you want to respond to that?
Rick stepped away.
Okay. We will follow back up with that particular question, but what I will say is that even in instances when an organization is able to apply for more than one award, the one application does not affect the second application because both applications are scored independently. And so it is entirely possible if 2 applications are allowed that a single applicant might be found, may be selected for one, but not all of the applications of the coverage areas that they are seeking to cover. So keep that in mind. As I mentioned, we'll circle back to make sure we get clear on that particular answer. But if you are able to submit more than one, both those applications should be as strong, and we will never read across applications. So in the same way that I said we wouldn't, as an evaluator, look for question 1 when we're trying to see your response to question 10, we wouldn't go back to what you said in question 1. We would not go from one application to see what you said in the other application to fulfill a requirement. And so each application is scored independently of one another, and all attachments and requirements need to also be fulfilled in each separate application. But we will clarify that answer. Do we have any other questions?
That's the last question in the chat.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Let me ask a question. Thank you, Tracy. Have you all accessed, for those of you who are in iSupplier, have you already accessed the RFP in iSupplier? Thumbs up if you have. Looks like most, I'm not seeing a lot of thumbs up. So again, it's available. We're asking people to go ahead and be an iSupplier. And I will say that because we know the RFP will be updated with the recording, today's recording, it will be updated with the FAQ document, frequently asked questions document. Always go back into iSupplier to see the RFP. Sometimes once people have access to the RFP, they look at the offline version of it The danger with that action is that you may not see when that RFP has been updated. So I always encourage people to go back to the system and make sure you're looking at the most current version of the RFP. Hopefully that answered the question that people didn't get a chance to ask. Lydia or Natasha, is there anything you would like to say as we close out?
No, nothing on our end. Thank you, Marlita.
So I want to thank you all for participating. I'm looking forward to reading many responses to this RFP. We wish you great success. And again, thank you for your interest in the work that's been done on behalf of the city through the Mayor's Office of Community Safety. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Peace.
Thank you.